My parents left me $75,000 for my college fund, but they gave it to my sister, Mandy, to use for her business. I sued them and got kicked out, but karma has struck back hard. I'm 18 and going through a very tough time. My life has always been tough, thanks to my narcissistic parents and their golden child. I have an older sister, Mandy, who is 24. She's the problem. From the time I was a kid, my parents favored my sister, Mandy. I never had a happy childhood because of it. She wasn't a bully, but she was crafty and opportunistic. She took advantage of our parents' feelings and got what she wanted. I don't blame her. My parents made it this way. She's their firstborn and has a special place in their heart. But I'm also their daughter. My parents favored my sister, which was fine until they made my life miserable. I felt like a spare part in the house. I mostly wore my sister's old clothes because they were too new to be thrown away. I played with my sister's toys because why spend money on new ones when my sisters were still in good condition? I remember it was only during Christmas that I got a new dress. Christmas was the only time I got a new dress. My parents didn't want to look bad in front of Grandpa and other guests, so they avoided getting judged by friends and relatives. I got one set of dresses, shoes, and other accessories on Christmas while my sister got as many as she wanted. If I ever complained about it, my mom would say, "Don't be impatient. Your sister's stuff is going to come to you next year." As a kid, I didn't understand why I couldn't have new things. I bought into their logic, but when I actually started understanding the situation, I made a fuss about it. I was either told that we were too poor to afford new sets for me or I was grounded for my behavior. I don't ever remember Mom asking me what I would want for dinner or cooking my favorite food. It was always about my sister, be it Christmas, Thanksgiving, or any other occasion. The menu was always based on my sister's taste. Once I rebelled about it and didn't eat the food, I stormed off the dinner table, got grounded, and was starved until I apologized to everyone and did the dishes for that entire week. It's exhausting to recount my sadness, but this is how it is. Do you know why my parents, particularly my mom, do this to me? It's because of her sister. My mom has suffered from narcissistic parents, so she ensured to become one. You see the irony. Mom is the eldest of 2 siblings. She says my parents spoiled the younger one and didn't spoil me at all. Mom was treated unfairly by her parents, so she decided not to treat her younger daughter the same way. I feel like Mom sees herself in my sister and treats her the way she wanted to be treated in her childhood. By the time I finished elementary school, I felt so resentful of my parents and my sister that I started spending my summers with my grandpa. He was the only one who loved me, who truly loved me. My grandpa wasn't very fond of my mom. I think he was able to see through my mom's ridiculous behavior. Maybe that's why he always rooted for me the year I completed elementary school. Grandpa invited me to stay with him at his farm. I felt so relieved. I'd never felt so free and relaxed. Grandpa got me everything I asked for. I'll admit I took advantage of his love. I asked for everything I couldn't get. At home, I had Barbies, dolls, dollhouses, video games, and all the other stuff I used to want but my parents didn't understand. I loved spending time with him at his farm in nature. He had a poultry farm and a small stable with 4 to 5 horses. He spent his days on them. Life was so fun in those days with him. I never wanted to come back home when it was time for high school. I insisted I'd get admitted to a school near my grandpa. I wanted to stay with him, and my parents were happy to let me. From freshman year in high school, I lived with Grandpa. It was a good arrangement for both of us. He was getting old and needed help, and I needed a break from my toxic family. I was in my junior year in high school when Grandpa fell ill. He called everyone and made his will known. He left his farm and stable to 2 of my uncles, got $150,000 in cash savings from Grandpa, which he gave to my dad. $75,000 of that was for me to use for college. I promised Grandpa I would finish college. My mom was happy because other family members got properties and a farm, while Grandpa only got a few grands. Grandpa reminded my dad that he had already taken his share of the property and sold it to pay off his debt and start a business just when I started my senior year. A year after high school, my grandpa passed away. It was the saddest day of my life. I had no one to turn to, so I moved back in with my parents. It wasn't easy, and they weren't happy about it. As my graduation day approaches, I've been trying to get my hands on the $75,000 that my grandpa left for me. I've been filling out college applications, and that's when the problem started. Whenever I asked about my money or mentioned the college, they would. When I lost my patience, they made strange faces and ignored the conversation. I put my foot down and asked them what the problem was and where my money was. That's when she said they'd given that money to my sister for her business. I was pretty shocked. I asked them why they thought that money was supposed to be for my college. They said it was no big deal and that I could wait a year because I was still too young to go to college. I said, "Hello? How can I be too young for college when my classmates who are the same age as me got into college, even though they couldn't reason with me? They're asking me to wait a year to pay my tuition." I said, "Why can't the golden child wait a year to start her business? I can't waste a year. I want to know what I can do to get the money back. Any suggestions?" A lot has happened in the last few months. My parents asked me to wait a year. I don't agree and keep pestering them for the money. They get mad and call me mean and selfish. They're gaslighting the situation. On top of that, my sister Mandy has started a campaign to portray me as the bad guy. I lost when my cousin told me that Mandy is going around and telling everyone that I'm jealous of her business and want money out of her. I told Mom that if they don't give me my money, I'm going to tell everyone that I gave my college fee to their useless daughter, which I think goes against Grandpa's will. My mom got really angry and said, "Do you want to go to that level? Then you better pay us the rent and have your own meal. Calculate the money we've spent on you for 18 years. We're even." I fought back, saying, "What the hell? They're still feeding their 24-year-old divorced daughter who has a child. They're being so mean to me and giving me my money. I got good grades, but they never seemed proud of me. Meanwhile, their golden child brought shame to the family, yet they still support her. I didn't mention my sister in my stories about living with Grandpa. She got pregnant by her boyfriend while I was there. By the time she tested it, it was too late to get rid of it. She had to tell my parents. They were disappointed, but there was little they could do. My mom is a conservative Christian, so she got her married. Mandy's boyfriend didn't want to get married either, but she felt she had no choice. He wasn't keen on taking responsibility for the child. My parents found him and confronted him about abandoning Mandy and her baby. He had evidence that she was mentally abusing him, so he filed for divorce on that grounds. My parents had to bring her back home. They've been supporting her ever since. After Grandpa passed away, Mandy and her child were taken care of by my mom. When I came back home, I found out that it's my mom who's raising the kid because my sister is often out. My dad got really angry at Mandy for leaving her child with my mom to take care of. My mom came to her rescue, saying that Mandy is busy finding a job for herself, so she's out. That's not true. I saw her so many times hanging around in the nearby cafes. I also saw her hanging out in parks with boys. She's a school dropout, so she's having trouble finding a decent job. She couldn't get a job, so she asked my mom for money to start her business. Despite all this, my parents still supported her. They gave her the money without even asking me. Until I posted here, I had no clue what options I had to retrieve my money except for asking them. So the next time I asked for the money, and they pushed back, I said I would sue them for violating Grandpa's will. I confronted them about violating Grandpa's will. They were taken aback. They knew I wasn't going to put up with their exploitation anymore. When I told them I was going to sue them for money, they backed down. It was unbelievable for them. I was no longer the gullible and vulnerable little girl. Mom pulled out a notepad and listed the monthly expenses they had spent on me. She put a quarter of the expenditure on my name and then the school fee and Christmas dress. I was amazed while she was writing it, and then she said, "Forget about the $75K you owe us. Pay us $200K before asking for your $75K. I got into a heated argument with my mom and then left the house after waiting in the area for an hour. I took a bus to my grandpa's house. I asked for Grandpa's diary and took his lawyer's number. I called him up and explained the situation. I asked him if he could help me out. He said he'd look into it. He assured me that I'm entitled to the $75K. Grandpa left it for me, and it was his responsibility that everyone gets as per the will. He said he would be sending an official notice to my parents to give me the money. If they don't, I can sue them. I'm really happy to get help, but I'm also worried about how my parents will react when they get the notice. I don't know what they'll do. This update is going to be shorter because I just wanted to let you know that you were right about my parents. I was mentally prepared for the inevitable. I spoke to my friend about sharing the condo with her. I moved in with her and took a part-time job at a cafe. The pay is too low, but they let me have some leftover food at closing time. I had already packed my belongings a day before the notice arrived. As expected, my mom kicked me out upon receiving the notice from the lawyer. She abused me and threw my stuff out of the house. I made the mistake of not moving out before, letting them enjoy the pleasure of kicking me out. She said I was like a snake, which they've been feeding in our backyard because I lived and survived on their money while planning on biting and backstabbing them. I told them I had no options. I can't jeopardize my life and my career because of their narcissism. The lawyer gave my parents a month to respond to the notice. They're about to breach the timeline. I think they're not taking it seriously because Mandy called and abused me for giving her a hard time. The family's parents aren't going to give me any money, and I can't do anything about it because I don't have the money to sue them. I didn't tell her what I thought. I listened to her, but when I couldn't take it anymore, I hung up on her. I told my lawyer about it, and he said we could sue them if they don't respond by next week. Update 3. I got in trouble with my parents for suing them. I didn't want to press any felonies on them, but they left me with no choice. I thought that the lawyer's notice would do the job, but they didn't respond to the lawyer's demand. I went home to tell them that they better comply with Grandpa's will or I'll have to seek legal action. They ganged up against me, hurled abuses at me, and my mom even threw things at me. I had left some of the non-essential items. At home, I was thinking of taking them to court later. My mom pulled it out of my closet and broke it into confetti in front of me to hurt me. I was there to sort out the matter without a legal hassle, but it seems they wanted a ride. I came back and told my lawyer to press the charges on them. He was happy to do it when they received the court order. My dad called me and said we could sort out the family matters within us. There was no need for a legal battle, really. I went home to sort out the family matters, but they turned hostile and left me with no choice. Now the ship has sailed, and they have to follow a legal path. I'm not interested in any compromise during the court hearings. My father was asked to pay $75 as per Grandpa's will, but he said he didn't have that much money. He said he would pay $10,000 monthly, but my lawyer said I needed that money for college. He said $10K a month wouldn't be enough. The attorney said my dad would have to pay my tuition and other expenses like housing and food up to a minimum value of $75K. If my expenses exceeded that, I'd have to cover the difference. I didn't like the idea of still being dependent on my dad. I didn't want to take the money, but I had no choice. My dad didn't have $75K to give me all at once, so I resisted this middle ground. He pleaded with me, though, and promised he wouldn't default. I agreed, but I told him that if he or my mom makes a fuss about it in the future, I'm going to sue them again. This time, I'm going to demand compensation for the mental torture. My dad agreed, but my mom and Andy went behind me. Mandy has been telling everyone that I have given my parents hypertension and brought shame to the house by dragging the family to court. Well, this is the irony. There ain't any shame or disgrace when she got knocked up, but I brought shame by just asking them for my own money. Wow, you know what? I don't care about it anymore. They labeled me a black sheep, and now I guess I'm happy being one. Update for Hey Peeps. I know I took a while to update. I was busy settling into a new life in college. I graduated with top grades from high school and sent the convocation invites to my parents, who didn't show up. Surprisingly, my dad did, and he seemed happy. It took him 18 years in a court case to realize that I was also his daughter and that I needed the love and care. I've since moved. I quit my job at the cafe and moved to my college dorm. The money I get from my dad covers tuition, accommodation, and food. Anything else, I'm on my own. I took up a part-time job near the college campus. I'm also giving math lessons to my classmates for some extra cash. I'm good at math. My dad has been sending the money quite diligently as ordered by the court. Some of you asked about my relationship with my dad. Dad was nowhere to be found when Mom was being mean to me. So, I'll tell you what happened. Dad saw everything that was wrong with me, but he ignored it. He ignored my problems and never questioned Mom about her behavior. He just obeyed her. In fact, he thought Mom was making good decisions to use my sister's clothes for me. He thought Mom was saving his money throughout my childhood. I saw Dad struggling financially, so he took any opportunity to save a penny. Dad was always looking for ways to save a penny. So, it's not surprising that he supported Mom financially. I'm not sure how he reacted to Mandy's unexpected pregnancy. From what I've heard, it was kept very quiet. Mandy's wedding was a complete secret. I was living with Grandpa at the time, so I didn't know anything about it. I'm thrilled to share that I'm currently living my dream life. I'm in college, excelling academically, and enjoying every minute of it. My relationship with my dad has improved significantly following the legal proceedings. Mom and Mandy were busy badmouthing me and portraying me as the bad guy, but they soon got their own back. Mandy got into trouble with the cops, and the money they had lent to her was seized. Mandy had opened a secret gambling business under the cover of a gaming zone. My parents didn't know about it. They thought it was actually a gaming parlor, but the cops busted her down and seized everything. All the machines and equipment were seized, along with whatever little money she had in her bank account. My parents used it to bail her out, so in the end, she's left with nothing. This is what she did with my grandpa's hard-earned money. I couldn't feel more satisfied, to be honest. Deep down, I didn't like the idea of pushing my dad to the corner to get my money. I'm glad I fought back because Mandy didn't use that money for good reason. She opened a home-wrecking gambling business after that encounter with the cops in prison. My dad threw her out of the house. My mom tried to advocate on her behalf, but my dad laid down the law. It's either Mandy or Dad. My mom doesn't work, so obviously she chose Dad. She asked Mandy to get a job and move out. Mandy has been using her child to emotionally manipulate Dad to let her live in the house. She's been successful until that gambling thing came out. Now I hear that Dad is no longer buying her BS and has kicked her out. She's living with her friend, but I don't know how long that will last. She hasn't contacted me for help. I don't expect she will after all the torture she and Mom have done to me. She better stay away from me. I'm not going to hold back on how I feel today before I write this update. I was reading my initial post and it made me emotional. I was in a really tough spot back then. I just lost my support system. My grandpa and parents ripped me off. They took my grandpa's inheritance. I was trapped in my own house by my narcissistic parents. I was a college student tonight. There was so much uncertainty about my future. All I could see was darkness and helplessness, but I'd like to thank this community for all the support. I still miss my grandpa. It's because of him that I'm in college today. He's my guardian angel. I know he's blessing me from wherever he is now. On to the next story. Story 2. My ex-wife cheated on me with Mr. Romantic. Now she's broke and drowning in debt from the lavish wedding she never gave me. She even has the nerve to ask me for money. I met my wife when we were in our mid-20s. We were friends for a while before we started dating. We dated for about a year, which isn't that long in the grand scheme of things, but at the time it felt like we'd been dating long enough. She mentioned getting married, and I said I wanted to wait a little longer. A few months later, I was ready to propose to my then-girlfriend. She accepted. At this point, I should have recognized the red flags, but I didn't. Why? Well, I was in love. My fiancé wanted a huge wedding, and I understand it was a special experience. However, I didn't see the point of spending a couple grand on what was essentially one day. I ended up convincing her to have a small, intimate ceremony. She seemed okay with it at the time, but I think as the months and years went by, I think she started to resent me for talking her into that. The thing is, we couldn't have afforded such a wedding at the time. I suggested that one day we could have the wedding of her dreams. I thought this would please her, but I felt like there was still resentment there, just beneath the surface. Was I the most romantic guy in the world? No, but I tried hard to keep the romance alive by doing little things for her over the years. My wife knew this when we got married. We didn't have kids, so there wasn't that pressure. The years passed, and by the time we were in our 40s, we had been married for almost 2 decades. Things had gotten stale for the past year or so, so I planned a romantic night out. I even asked my sister for help because I wasn't very romantic. It didn't work out. My wife never came home that night. When she did, she said she'd stayed at a friend's house. They'd been drinking, so she figured it was safer for her to just spend the night there. I saw no reason to doubt her, so I took her at her word. The next night I tried again. We had a nice dinner. When I tried to initiate intimacy, she brushed me off, saying she was too tired. I didn't think much of it. Both of us worked a lot, which is why we were finally able to afford the lifestyle we were currently living. This trend continued, and it got to the point where I had to ask myself if I was going to continue to believe her lies. I reached out to her friends to see if she was there, but they covered for her. I shouldn't have been surprised. The only way I could think was to directly confront her about her lies and ask her if she was cheating. To my surprise, she did. When I confronted her, she admitted everything. I was in shock. I don't know what I was expecting. I thought she might deny it and tell me I was wrong. But she didn't. I asked who it was and how long it had been going on. He was a family member of one of her friends. She met him one day. There was an instant attraction. He was so romantic. There it was, the one thing I could never manage to do. I did try, but my wife didn't think I was trying hard enough. This guy was everything I wasn't and more. She said our marriage ended that night, and what began was the divorce process. It wasn't a bitter divorce. We agreed to split everything down the middle. The house would be sold and we'd each take half. This seemed like the best option for us to get away from each other quickly once everything was sold. Finally, I purchased a condo with the funds we divided from the joint account. I still had a decent amount left over that I planned to save for the future. The house sold and I invested that money as well. You never knew when you might need it. My ex did the opposite. She spent her money and bought an even larger house than the one we shared. I heard that she was planning a lavish wedding. Was it the wedding she had always wanted? I was having flashbacks to the wedding we had all those years ago. My ex had resented me for all these years because we never had the wedding she truly wanted. As embarrassing as it is to admit, I did look at the pictures on Facebook afterwards. My God, it was a huge affair. Everything looked so expensive. I can just imagine how much money she spent on the whole thing, including the dress. At that point, I knew I had to take a step back. I had to stop obsessing over this woman who was my ex. I focused on spending time with my friends and family, which helped. I assumed my ex was spending time with her. Turns out, though, that not everything was great. I learned that a year after they got married, they were in debt. My ex spent the divorce settlement on the expensive house and expensive wedding, so she had nothing left. Her job did bring in a decent amount of income, but my ex was the only one making good money in that household because the app was a disaster. She reached out to me to see if I could lend her some money. My ex played on our past relationship and the memories we made over 2 decades, but I wasn't buying it. I told her that it wasn't my problem that she spent all of her divorce settlement on pointless stuff. I hung up on her and she called at least 3 more times that night, along with leaving 3 very nasty voicemails. After listening to them, I just laughed. I played them for my friends to show how far she had fallen. They all found them as funny as I did. My ex truly had no shame or was just that desperate. I don't know if she ever truly believed that I would give her the money or not. Even if she had reached out to me a few months prior, I still wouldn't have given it to her. At no point was I ever that desperate. I blocked her number that night because I didn't want to hear another word from her. She said we were done. She cheated and wanted to go be with her app, who was the new love of her life. If she'd planned better, my ex would have had the money, just like I still did. Most of my family and friends were happy to see her go. I wonder if they'd ever liked her or just tried to get along with her for my sake. Either way, it didn't matter anymore because my ex was a part of my past, and that was where she was going to stay.